Hello students, Mr. Young here. Welcome to Chapter 11, Lesson 1. Today we're talking about the founding of Rome. So, the golden age of Greece is now gone, but Greek culture thrived in the Hellenistic kingdoms. Now the Hellenistic kingdoms have fallen. There's new power in town, Rome. Have we seen the last of Greek influence? No, we have not. Much of it survived in Rome. You'll see the similarities as we study Rome for the next 2 chapters. Today we learn about how Rome started. Okay, so Rome is in Italy. You can see it chilling right here. Here's the Italian peninsula. In comparison, here's Greece. There's the Persian Empire was over here. Here's Spain, France, and Germany is above that. Here's the Barbary states. Anyways, Italy is a pretty sweet place, and as a result, a lot of folk moved into there. It was centrally located in the Mediterranean Sea. Right there, see, here's the Med. Here's Italy right in the middle. It had some rugged mountains, but also had good tracts of fertile land for farming. The climate was also mild, and who doesn't like good weather? The geography made it a land that could grow food to support a large population. Rome was located not far from the Mediterranean Sea. You can see it's pretty close to the coast. It was 15 miles up what's called the Tiber River. They could still use the river to travel and get lots of water, and still had easy access to the sea, but they were far enough up the river to avoid any attacks by the Mediterranean Sea. Let's move into the origins of Rome, the city itself. So there are multiple legends on how Rome was founded. One was written by the famous Roman poet Virgil. Virgil wrote that after the Trojan War, a group of Trojan warriors led by Aeneas sailed away from Troy and escaped to the Italian peninsula. Once there was some fighting and war, but Aeneas married the daughter of a local Latin-speaking king, and they became the Romans that founded Rome. The story I heard more frequently is the tale of Romulus and Remus. So the tale gets a little weird if you dig too deep. But the short story is that these 2 babies were twins, and they were left beside the Tiber River to die. They were found by a she-wolf who basically cared for them until they were found and raised by a shepherd. They grew up to build the city of Rome. One got mad at the other and killed them, sort of a Cain and Abel-esque story. But that's the story of how the Rome was founded by twins that were raised by a wolf. Pretty interesting. Alright, back to the facts. Little is known about the first people of Italy. There is evidence to suggest that Neolithic people began to settle into villages as far back as 5000 BC. A group of Latin-speaking folks settled into the peninsula between 2000 and 1000 BC. So, just like all the other civilizations we learned about, it starts with some basically cavemen figuring out that farming is easier than hunting and gathering. Let's see. Oh, it was these Latin folk that finally settled in here, the Latin-speaking folk, and they settled the hills of what would become Rome around the year 1000. And they're kind of ultimately considered the founders of Rome. 2 other groups settled in Italy and would have a great impact on Rome, the Greeks and Etruscans. The Greeks settled in the southern part of the peninsula for a few hundred years and introduced grapes and olives to the Italian people. The Romans adopted the Greek alphabet and a lot of their cultural aspects. You can see like a lot of their buildings look Greek. Let's see, that sounds like some pretty major influences, but the Etruscans actually had way more. The Etruscans were a group of people that originally settled north of Rome. So you had the Greeks to the south, the Etruscans to the north. They were ruled by their nobles who grew rich off of trade and mining. Now they moved south and took control of Rome. These people were educated. They studied the arts. They were skilled with copper and other metals. They wrote. They made weapons and jewelry. They taught the Romans to build houses with brick and tile roofs. They also used irrigation methods to drain the swamps between the hills of Rome. They influenced Roman style and put the toga at the very top of Roman fashion. The Etruscan army were to serve as a model for what would one day become the Roman army. Here's the toga. Alright, the Romans learned a lot from their Etruscan rulers, but kind of got sick of being under their rule, and Roman tradition says that the Romans overthrew the Etruscans in 509 BC and formed a republic. We remember that a republic means that there are officials elected to represent the citizens within the government instead of everyone being involved in government. You select officials and they rule on your behalf. Early Rome was a small city surrounded by non-Roman competitors, like those Greeks to the south we talked about, and more Etruscans to the north. In early Rome, all landowning men were required to serve in the military. Rome fought the surrounding people for 200 years and gained control of almost the entire Italian peninsula. Its soldiers were well trained, and discipline was harsh to ensure loyalty. The Romans initially fought like Greeks, using large, very large phalanx formations and attacking all from one direction. So it was like this. Well, they decided, the generals, that if they broke down their units into smaller units and then subunits within that, you could do things like tell one group to go over here on the flank, or turn and go behind the enemy, and things like that. So they broke their army into smaller units called legions. Now, if you dive into this further, you can see that legions are made of centuries, and there's all these subunits and names, sort of the ancient equivalent to division, brigade, battalion, company, platoon, squad, that kind of thing. But we're not going to go into all that. What's important is they were able to divide their men, but their main military unit was a legion. The Roman soldiers also had some nifty equipment to help them in their battles. All men carried a sword called a gladius, or a gladius, and a spear. You can see here it was called a pilum. And they've got their helmet, and they all had their big shield and their shoes and stuff. In the book, for some reason, it's like, hey, they have a spear called a pilum and a sword called a gladius. Now, this is a cool little nugget. To further bring organization to the chaos that is battle, the Romans carried standards. A standard, and I have a link here if you want to look into it further, is like a tall symbol or flag that the men would recognize. It was held high so they could be seen from afar. Each subunit within a legion had a standard so that the men could see where they were supposed to be. So if you're fighting like that, and all of a sudden you look up and you're like, oh, where's my unit? You go, oh, there they are over there. I'm going to fight my way over that way. That's why they had their standards. So each subunit had a standard. I said initially the very early standards were multiple animals, but pretty soon they were all just some form of eagle or flag. Let's take a look at the external site. There's an eagle. There's a flag. It kind of changed over time. I believe that's the standards after the time of Constantine. Let's see. So each subunit had its standard. It was held high. We still use standards in the military today. It was an honor to bear the standard. There was a standard bearer, and his job was pretty much to stay close to the commander and always keep it up high, and it was never supposed to touch the ground. And if the standard bearer was wounded or killed, it was the responsibility of pretty much like whoever was nearby to pick that thing up and hold it high. So the men knew where the unit was. You never wanted to lose the standard. Like, it was really awesome if you could capture somebody else's standard, but losing your own standard was a giant no-no. It was like a disgrace and dishonor upon the legion. And you've got a pretty cool guy here with his dragon standard. So the Romans met with initial success, not only because of their awesome army, but they ruled effectively. They built fortifications to protect the lands they conquered, and they treated their conquered people fairly. They built roads to move soldiers and supplies quickly, and some of the people they conquered were actually offered full citizenship, usually the Latins, the people that spoke Latin. Others were considered what they called allies. They paid taxes and supplied men for soldiers, but they were free to handle their own local affairs. Their system worked, though, as Rome continued to grow, and we'll learn about more in tomorrow's lesson. Your quiz today, it's going to be a 10-point quiz. I'm not quite done with it yet, but it's going to be a 10.5, 10-point question, 10-point quiz with 5 questions, multiple choice. I got it. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a good day.